Hi everyone, and thank you for participating in the Los Angeles chapter's Grammys Bridges the Gaps. I'm Kiana Conley, I'm your Los Angeles chapter executive director, and our Los Angeles chapter board committees have been using our time wisely. We've been working with this leadership to meet, to dive deeper into the current hot topics that you all have been buzzing about. So thank you again for joining us for Conversations, Grammys Bridges the Gaps.
Thank you, Kiana, and thank you to all these amazing panelists. I am humbled to be in your presence. So let's start off with a couple of questions. So, what are some of the current challenges for songwriters and composers in the studio? One of the reasons why we wanted to have this group of people, both composers and songwriters, is to talk a lot about the common struggles that we have. Even though our paths might seem different, they're a lot more similar than we would think. So how would you address issues of safety and belonging?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for a really long time. I started in the industry at 16, interning for Island Black Records. Wrote my first hit when I was 28. Amazing, you've done so much so young, it's incredible. And I'm much older now. But I can say some of the development, looking back, I definitely feel there have been pauses because of unsafe situations. For example, with genres, every time I try to be in a session with like R&B, hip hop music, when I moved out to LA specifically, I was in an unsafe session. And it would just discourage me from wanting to do that kind of music. Where on the East Coast, I'm from the Bronx. I knew people there, so I did feel safe because those are my boys. But coming out here, it was like so different. I've been in several situations where my safety was threatened, unfortunately. And the crappy thing about it is it's sometimes not even like some people that do that to other people, it's like a power thing, like, oh, I'm more powerful than you need something from me. But you'll get surprised, like when it last happened to me, it wasn't a person of any power, it was an equal peer, an equal producer, and they just put me in a bad situation, and it was quite shocking. So that's something that is really important for us to speak about, and it's thankful people like you, who I feel super safe with. If we could clone you, that would be great. And the other issue with being a songwriter is like, not necessarily safe situations, but just creating an ecosystem where songwriters are in a situation to monetize. And we're in this culture of having to write, and 90-something% of those songs never become anything. And it's discouraging, and you're working for free, and you're paying to get to the session, you're paying for your own food, you're paying for gas, you're paying for everything. Sometimes you're buying the artist food, and they're not even aware, like, you're not making any money from this, and if we do, it's gonna be like 18 months later. So just kind of creating a world where it makes sense to be a songwriter is a big struggle right now.
Yeah, you guys both said something that definitely I relate to, especially when I first started coming out to LA. I'm from the East Coast too, I'm from Jersey, and I was coming back and forth like every week when I was 19. I'm 25 and I still look, underage. So just imagine back then, I'm 5 feet, little black girl, and it was definitely, different being in these spaces where I don't know these people, especially being in a male-dominated industry. So what I would do everywhere I would go, I have my manager with me, tall black man, who I felt comfortable and felt safe with. So there was never a time where I would feel out of place or threatened because I had that sense of security, or I was lucky to have that sense of security with me. Even like when we would have to travel out of the country, like I would make sure, like, if you guys want me to go, like I also have to have him with me, just so I would feel safe. Because again, like, I'm out of my comfort zone, and yeah, that was a big thing for me.
Wow, I'm just taking it all in because fundamentally, I'm still amazed at how a person's sense of power can create such a disconnect from the fact that we all need the synergy. We all need a sense of chemistry to get the music across, and the music is so otherworldly. It's so transcendent. It transcends this need for hierarchy and power tripping and you know, whatever that is. So I remember back in the day when I toured as a background singer, and, you know, was on the tour bus, and, you know, afterwards there were incidents and events. And I think I was so young, I was not quite aware of how to walk in that space. And now that I'm older, one of the things that I now value more than anything is autonomy, being able to sit so deep inside of your sense of yourself that you know, if this doesn't feel right, and how can I take care of myself? I need to speak up. If I'm not comfortable speaking up, I need to remove myself. And yeah, I may lose that gig. I may lose being able to pay my rent. You know, there's all sorts of external pressures. But I guess what I'm so alarmed that it's triggering a lot of things in me right now, what you all have said. So that's why I'm kind of skipping around in my ability to communicate. But I think it's remarkable that you had the wherewithal to know what you needed to have in place with this presence of your manager, and how you also unfolded into standing up for yourself and saying this is not acceptable, and how you always had a sense of compassion and integrity. And I think those qualities, that kind of internal compass, are really important muscles, more important than even the external success, is the internal road mapping of how do I walk in this world? How do I continuously elevate my sense of purpose and my sense of power without taking away from someone else?
Can I say one thing, Dar, before?
Sure.
So, as we've been talking about it too, I never thought about the idea of having community being safe. It's funny that we get in these we have these group discussions often, and there's our, I call it the secretary, right, where we're not always ourselves because we want to be on brand, we want to say the right thing. But if I'm just with my homies, right, the thing I would say was, you know, be open-hearted, right? Like we have to create the industry that we want to be in, right? Because a lot of times we say they and the man and the person, and those people are very real. I don't want to act like it's not. But I think we are the community, right? So if we create this kind of open-hearted kind of community, then I think we'll all feel more safe. You know what I mean? And that, again, I'm privileged to not have my physical safety feel threatened. But I think that's one thing that I'm gathering as we've talked is, you know, in your circles, make sure that you're creating the open-hearted spaces that you want to feel safe in, right? Instead of trying to jump in spaces where you don't feel safe. Again, I know we all have upward mobility and we're not always going to be with our friends. But I think the more that we talk about these things and make it okay to be authentic, the safer our community will be.
Agreed. And speaking of finding your community and the people that you work well with, what has your career taught you about being or finding a good collaborator in the work you create, and in working with corporate clients also?
What my career has taught me is very often, so what I've been really good at, why I'm still here in this terrible business, is that I'm really good at development. So I like to find an artist who I just wholeheartedly believe in and is not necessarily the hottest person, and find something that brings the best out in them and find that sound, whether it's the cool sound or not, I don't care. I just love incredibly talented people. So I've done that my whole career. My whole career has been new artists. It's never been the big artists. And then, of course, I have written, you know, gotten cuts on bigger artists, but it's always kind of the growth phase. So finding that, keeping that space, that excitement about music, keeping that space, that belief and that faith of why we do this in the first place is so important. And never becoming jaded with it, never confusing the business side with the creative side, has really, like, because I'm working with someone right now who's a child, and this is the most excited I think I've ever been in music. And I'm like, how am I so excited about a kid, you know? But I am, because it's just all about the music. So that's literally the only reason why I'm here, is just because at the end of the day, just stay super connected to the source of why we do this.
Being a good collaborator has taught me a lot in life in general, and the key thing is being malleable. Um, because when you lock in with an artist or even just on the corporate side, like you have to adapt to different circumstances, like, and that's what really being a good collaborator is. Like, for instance, me as a songwriter, I have to get in where I fit in, and not all the time. And sometimes I may have to take the lead role, or sometimes I have to let the artist take the lead role, and I just like might just help out with a little bit or make tweaks, or even just if it's just being a vibe in the room. And it just really taught me that, like, that's really what life is about in different circumstances outside of music. So I think it's also like being a good person, and that's what makes people want to keep coming back, and keep working with you. And music is about collaboration in general. That's why songs have so many credits nowadays, because not all the time can you just have one person. There's so many ideas coming from a bunch of people. So in order to, have the results that we have, everybody has to pitch in and be a good person in the room so that everyone feels comfortable, feels safe in order to create magic.
Yeah, I wanted to add that another important element is communication, being able to communicate and at the same time listen to the overall communication. As a composer for film and TV, and I know Dara, I'm sorry, I want you to jump in as well, but we often get, asked by studios to create scores and music that may not be what we have perceived as, the direction we would take, or it could be coming from another creative, it could be coming from the director, the producer. So, and you have a tight timeline. The turnaround to deliver these cues and revisions is typically quite fast, right? So you have to really not be so precious about what you feel might be the direction. I mean, you have to learn when to let go or how to make a compromise in a way that doesn't feel off-putting to yourself, and understand that you're there to serve the vision of their production. And so how do you do that without internalizing? Like, you could spend hours, we spend hours sometimes on cues, only to be told, no, that's not even close. And you have to not only not be so precious about that music, but you have to not be so precious about your ego. And that's why, again, I come back to the word autonomy. Because if you really know who you really are and the true anointing of the music, that seed is so powerful, and it's so much a part of self-awareness. That's the foundation right there. So you can have all kinds of frustrating moments and times of just feeling completely wiped out. But if you have that foundation of, wait a minute, I know I still have something here. It may not be for this particular moment. It may not even be for this particular experience, but I know I have something. So I'm going to always come back to contribute from that place. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's learning how not to internalize rejection and frustration, and knowing that your anointing of the music is so much more vast than that one opportunity or that one interaction. And that, you continue to unfold. And then you can also create your own body of work. So talk a little bit. Yes, you.
Yeah, I mean, I often say that, at least scoring for film and television, it's a team sport. And I also like to say that we're less sometimes in the music business as we are the music department of the film business. So it's really just seeing what the complete vision is. I have a large and ever-growing demo graveyard that of cues and of demos of other things that I've written, and I'm like, I like this, and they're like, no, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll just save this for later, and like I'm gonna take that vibe part and put it in this later on, for a completely different project. So to me, it's just never regretting writing a piece of music and being open to kind of contributing the best way to the task at hand.
Yeah, the interesting part of collaboration. First off, collaboration for me has been the secret sauce of my success. Like all of my success has been collaborative. It took me a long time to be open to that and malleable, as you said, Nisha. But the real learning part is when you're trying to collaborate with people who don't want to collaborate, right? And so I would say, especially in the film business, right? I have a unique perspective, right? Because I have a history as a producer and songwriter and obviously a composer. And in the film business, I would say that's unique to the recording business is it is a group, it is a community, but you have a few people who really have the say. And sometimes that shifts. And I would say you definitely
Middle of the project, even.
yeah, that's true. But you know, the bishop has spoke well about you know being true to yourself and having a direction. And I've been in cases where it's like, look, we need something in 24 hours. Here's the brief, or here's what we need it to sound like. Here's the scene. Follow the temp. You do it. It's like, oh, it's amazing. And then somebody else says, no, that's terrible. And then you got to do it again in 30 minutes. And so you learn that. Everything is a learning experience. Like you said, the demo graveyard is ripe for inspiration, if you will. But also going into every collaborative process with the instinct to learn. Because you will learn so much working with people who think completely different than you. It may be very frustrating, but learning their process and learning their hows and their whys can just be such an additive part to your process if you're willing to learn.
Great. And speaking of things that make us good collaborators, how do you attract more work? And what has been your experience in navigating the industry?
Me personally, I have a different approach to attracting more work. Like, personally, I like to put myself out there and using social media, especially when I first came out. That was how I would, just expand my network with producers, different songwriters, even artists and A&Rs, just like showcasing like what I do, and also reaching out to people like in the DMs, like, hey, I'm a songwriter, let's work, let's collab. And when they would send me beats, I would look out. Again, everyone, the music business is a collaborative industry. So usually on beats, there are multiple producers. So what I would do is I would get a beat pack from one producer, look at the other collaborators on there, and then I would search them up and be like, hey, I made a demo to one of your beats. You send me a beat pack, and then keep the cycle going. And that was how I was able to get my foot in the door, just by getting more work and just reaching out, putting myself out there.
That's super dope. I love contacting artists through social media, and I'm also like a stalker. So if I, Labyrinth probably doesn't know this, but that's how I met him. Was I knew he was going to be at a concert, so I went to that concert, and I was like, just so happened to sit next to him, like, hey, wow, I'm a songwriter too.
So crazy.
Wow.
It was meant.
Right. And I do that often, like if I really want to meet someone and I've extended all options of someone else introducing us, I'm like, screw it, let me just figure it out my own. But before, like, so I started writing in like for a living in 2010. And in those days we had like MySpace, there weren't all these options to network. MySpace was kind of lit though. But like, right. So I didn't have options, and I didn't have producers that wanted to work with me. I didn't have co-writers. I didn't learn to co-write till a few years after having my first songs out. So I had like very little help, but what I would do is get tracks from people, and also tracks that were already out, like instrumentals like dance instrumentals that were out for years that nobody wrote top lines to them. And I would just literally write to like anything, and that's how I got my first song, which became the song of the FIFA World Cup, was from me just taking a deadmau5 track, cutting it up, writing a pop song over it with I had no co-writers, no producers, no one. You got to work with what you have. I think it was at Julia Michaels, some interview I saw, like talking about like appreciate the room you're in, not the room you want to be in, and it's all about creating that energy with your people. Like, if you guys decide you're the new team, then just do that, and eventually it will become something, as opposed to just striving to be in, oh, but that room's popping right now, that room's popping right now. Like, you might be the next room that's popping. So
Cool. I might combine a couple of things because we're running short on time already. So again, a thing that brings us together as both composers and songwriters, and the thing that separates us a lot of times is sync licensing versus composing original music. And what has your experience been as a composer or songwriter, and what lessons could one profession learn from the other? And in the same time, if you want to sneak in something about tracking royalties and residuals, have at it.
Man, so it's a lot there. I would say it took me a long time to not be precious, right? Because as a producer, I would spend days on a snare sound. Like, real talk, I have records that I wrote in 2004 that I'm still trying to get off melodically, right? But I would say that's inherently the difference between producing and composing, right? Composing, you just don't have the time. Like, and then truthfully, picture is primed, right? So you have a scene where you've done this intricate, perfect, melodic thing that combines these scenes and ideas and themes, and you're just impressed with yourself, and everybody hates it. Whereas when you produce, right, there's a spotlight shined on your hi-hat sound or this cool EQ trick you did. You know what I mean? So in sync specifically, it caters to production, right? And that moment, that needle drop moment. You have the big love scene. Everybody's been waiting for the characters to get together, and you have that perfect snare sound. They're going to hear it because also the engineers will turn it up, right? But also in that same session that you're mixing, right, they'll turn your score way down. You know what I mean? So because picture is prime. I've said a lot. I'm trying to go fast so I can get everybody else talk. But I would say that's the main difference is that you can really go in, be detailed, in sync. You have the right lyric, the right moment, the right sound, and score. You have to be kind of the moderator of the dialogue between the audience and the picture. And as far as royalties, I would say care. Be like, just care. You gotta be detailed and annoying. You're gonna have to call your PRO sometimes and say, hey, yo, this was not on my cue sheet. What's up? I did this. You gotta really be meticulous because if you don't know, then nobody else is gonna know. You know what I mean? And there's so many hands and ways that your contribution can get lost. You just have to be really detailed.
Thanks. And this was great. Catherine, anything else to add in our last minute?
Oh, wow. Just again, to me, it's all about relationships. And really, everything we've all been talking about is taking initiative. Take initiative. Do not wait for permission to self-express, to be yourself. Do not wait for anybody to discover you. You have an incredible, each of us has an engine of desire that is so strong just because we care about what we're passionate about. So just find that community, find your relationships. It's incredible. I'm still jaw-dropped being here in your presence, really. I'm speechless. Go ahead, take it away.
Sure.
Yeah, as far as like monetization, which is a huge thing, like we need to understand like the music industry is not set up for you to get your money. That is the number one thing. Like, it's not an easy thing. So, I was speaking at South by 2 weeks ago, and there were a lot of self-published songwriters, and most of them were not signed up with the MLC. So there was a lot of money that they're not collecting. I've been with a major publisher most of my career, so that doesn't mean all my songs are accounted for, and I get lazy. I'm like, did I check ASCAP? Did I check Sony? Did I check this? Probably not, because my statement is 3,000 pages, and I don't like to do it. Honestly, it's a lot of work, and I just want to write songs. The other thing is like signing up with SAG, AFM, SAG, after Sound Exchange. All these, you have to really be like a clerical person. You have to be on top of your stuff. You have to fight for things constantly because it's literally like designed for you not to collect your money. So that is one of the hardest things to do and to get people to really care about. And it's really hard to care about it when you're in this hustle mode of, I just got to get my next cut. I just got to get this. You're not thinking about it, but then you look back and you have lost thousands and thousands of dollars, and then it might be too late to collect that money at some point. So that's just my advice to you guys.
Yeah, mine would be, again, like you said, caring, but also finding people who care just as much as you, and that's building the right team. Because again, like, you'll be in hustle mode and you're not thinking about that type of stuff. And also, you may not know, but you have to do the research and also find people who know just as much or even more, preferably more than you know. So like for me, like I stay on my manager about that. He hunts down my publishers. I talk to my publishers, make sure they're hunting that down. PROs and my business management. Business management will make sure they go and find royalties as well that's out there. So again, it all comes down to checks and balances and finding the right team that care just as much as you and who's going to fight just as much as you and preferably more.
All right.
Hey guys, so great to meet you.
Hi.
My question is, I'm a developing songwriter, and I want to know, what are 3 of the biggest, most important tools that we should have in our toolbox, starting out?
I would say,
Yeah.
I would say, be able to record yourself, 1,000 billion trillion %. The songwriters that can record themselves, especially on the composer side, get the most work, because then I don't have to stop my session to go record you for 8 hours. I would say also have an encyclopedic knowledge of your favorite songs and why they're hits. And I would say also have an encyclopedic, obsessive knowledge of your favorite songwriters and why they write hits.
Can I ask how many songs do you have recorded?
Recorded about, but they're rough demos that I recorded in my bedroom.
Okay, so when you have 300, then you're kind of in the mix. You've got to have like really quickly, like the year I was like, okay, I really need to get to be, I used to work at a shoe store. How do I quit the shoe store in my 20s? And I worked full time at a shoe store as assistant manager. I was in a wedding band on the weekends, and I was in my own band. I worked about 80, 90 hours a week. After work, I would commute to a studio, which was a 2-hour commute each way. That's 4 hours, and write a full song, a whole demo by myself, and record it. That is the New York hustle, but I did that for an entire year. I physically got sick, which I don't recommend because I was so skinny because I couldn't even eat enough food for the calories, but that's how much I wanted it. So you gotta be in the grind. 3 songs, not yet. So you gotta work, build your catalog. My whole goal for that year was to build a catalog to even present to people. What do I have to show? Why should I be in this session? Who am I? I had to develop my sound. Who am I as a writer? What do I have to say? What inspires me to write? What's my style? So all those kind of things only come with time. So I would say, like, get yourself your home set up if you don't have one, and just work your tail off.
I would say number 1, be a sponge. I look at being a musician as like being a doctor. There's always new things to learn, especially like what's current, what does music sound like on the radio today? How do I get ahead of it? Even, studying the music from the past, because, everything, we're innovators. So you have to, learn the past in order to, build on top of that. And also just like listening to all different types of genres of music, so you're not put in a box and you have inspiration. So that's 1, being a sponge. 2, being disciplined and consistent. Like when I was in college, I told myself to make a song a day, and I stuck to that. And there was times where like I had tracks that didn't inspire me, but I still pushed myself to do something. And you're not gonna make a hit every day. You're not gonna make something you're proud of every day, but it's just the fact that every day you have a chance to become better than yesterday. So that's one thing, and it gets easier. It's like doing homework. And the third thing is have a good lawyer.
Yes, absolutely.
Before you even have a manager, get a lawyer.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. My name is Natalie. I have a question that's really bugging me because it affected me recently. I want to address this streaming reality and how we are actually now not doing needle drops so much, but doing blanket licenses, which means that a lot of times we don't get upfront money to produce our own tracks and then end up after a year and a half getting 4 zeros and a digit per view, which means on the top streaming show, I recently got $59 for 2.5 million views. So I'm like, how are we gonna fight this?
Everybody looking at me while y'all looking at me. You know, it's interesting. I had a very great talk with a friend and colleague, Michelle Lewis of SONA yesterday, and Autumn and I kind of talked about it back there as well. We're at the forefront of fighting these new things. We also, in our meeting, Kiana talked about AI, which is it's terrifying us and at the same time exciting us creatively. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Natalie, I would say Natalie, it's gonna take all of us, one, to fight, and to use whatever leverage we can. I think disruption is coming again. We're gonna have a huge disrupting force, right? That's gonna be the next 6, 18, 24, who knows how long. And I think in that disruption, we can try and undo some of the things that happened in the last disruption. And that's what I would say would be the best answer, because obviously I don't have the power to be like, hey, pay us more. We deserve it, right? There are lots of things going on. There's a lot of lobbying going on. We had a huge win with the rate increase, right? And the conversation is about us having seats at the table. Again, because there's going to be so much widespread industry disruption, I think it's going to be easier for us to have seats, and I mean collectively us, have seats at these tables so we can not have somebody else determine our value, but we get to determine the value. And the conversation right now is, hey, label, or hey, executive, how much do you want to pay the songwriters? Instead of, hey, how much of this pie are we getting? I feel like that conversation will answer this question amongst others.
Yeah, a lot of it is legislation, and I did Grammys on the Hill last year, but I also was one of the CRB witnesses last year for the trial, which determines how much we make from streaming. And thankfully, we are getting a raise, but it's not where we need to be. And we got to be loud. We got to be active. We have to be activists, and we can't be fearful of those moments, because I want to say this to you, like, whatever your highest moment is, whenever your biggest film or whatever your big moment is, speak the loudest. One of the things I would love in our industry is when we get that big moment, that spotlight, talk about the things that matter, that are affecting everyone else besides ourselves. And because we were there at one point, we have a long way to go, and it is really, really scary, but we are making strides, and there are a lot of good people rooting for us. But also just get active in the organizations that are fighting for this, like pay membership fees. These are all nonprofits run by people like us. Help them help you.